Did you recall this? Um, when Laura Ingraham interviewed Trump and Trump was asked who he's kind of supported for Canada, and Trump released a major bombshell in support for the Liberals and Mark Carney. People thought he was going to go Pierre Polyev because Pierre Polyev was kind of more on his side when it came to policies, when it came to the border, when it came to dealing with the fentanyl crisis. At least Polyev was willing to acknowledge it, but he went a different route, and it scratched a lot of people's heads, including mine, to figure out why exactly he was supporting Mark Carney in this. Listen.
The Liberal Party is going to win now in the next election, most likely. And they were down and out. Isn't that going to make them more hostile to us and possibly
no, I'd rather deal with a liberal than a
for China, closer to Canada, and that would really put us in a bind.
The conservative that's running is stupidly no friend of mine. I don't know him, but he said negative things. So when he says negative things, I couldn't care less. I think it's easier to deal actually with a liberal.
I think it's actually more easier to do with the liberal than the conservative. The conservative was not nice to me. Not nice. Not a Mr. Nice Face. So he made that assertion, and people scratched their heads. I was even scratching my head thinking, like, okay, this is a guy who wants Canada to fix its border and drug crisis. Obviously, that's something that most Canadians can agree to, obviously. But now you want to support the party and the guy running it that was responsible for this dilemma, responsible for the trade war. It really kind of add up. And also, the liberals are more harsh on Trump than conservatives. Conservatives are just piggybacking on the Liberal Party, but the Liberal Party was the one that came up with all these antics and tactics. Why would you support that? It didn't make sense to me. There's another take of this. This was inside the White House, where Trump once again tried to state the rhetoric of 51st state. I don't believe that rhetoric. I don't believe it as a threat. More on the sake of the fact that Trump can barely manage his own country. I don't think taking upon Canada is going to be any better. Also, no offense to my Canadian brothers and sisters, but why? Why would you want Canada part of the United States? That's like adding another California. Do you really want that? Do you really want that, America? Just didn't add up. I don't think it's going to happen. But nevertheless, he doubled down on it, and then he brought attention about how he favors the liberals.
And I don't think I've heard you say this in all of the talk about Canada becoming the 51st state. You're concerned that if they became the 51st state, they would be a very, very blue state. Very, very big and very, very blue.
No, there might be, but it would, you have that order.
And just to tell people, because I know, again, American and Canadian viewers, here in Canada, the liberals are red, the conservatives are blue, but it's reversed in your guys in America. The Democrats are more liberal are blue, and the Republicans are more red. So just keep that in mind. When they say that the country is going to be more blue, they mean it's going to be more Democrats in regards to American politics, not blue and conservative. Want to put that out there.
Artificial line that straight artificial, that looked like it was drawn by a ruler. Somebody with I don't mean a ruler like a king, I mean like a ruler, this way. And
no, we didn't get
just
that.
Just an artificial line that was drawn in the sand or in the ice. And and can I tell you, Peter,
and also the other thing to add to why I just don't believe the 51st state, threats on all this is a guy who claims that the borders are such an issue that we have to militarize the entire southern border, but not worry about the northern border. The northern border is far more greater than the southern border. It's larger. And I would argue it's maybe even more dangerous because our immigration system is such a racket, such a nuisance that there's people sneaking into Canada to then sneak into America because there's less security at the northern border. So it doesn't make sense to me why a man who is so dead set on securing the border, but then also argue and say, well, the northern border is just an artificial line. It's like drawn with a ruler, not like a king ruler, but a ruler. So I just don't believe any of this. I believe this is just hype for his sake. And you know what Trump is. He's a goofball. He's an entertainer. He's two-faced. He'll say one thing in his face and one thing out of his ass. That's who he is.
You add that to this country, what a beautiful landmass, the most beautiful landmass anywhere in the world. And it was just cut off for whatever reason. It would be great. Now, is it liberal? Maybe. But, you know, a conservative until I got involved, because I don't care who wins up there. I frankly probably would do better with a liberal than the conservative, if you want to know the truth. But just a little while ago, before I got involved and totally changed the election, which I don't care about, probably it's to our advantage, actually. But the conservative was leading against, I call him Governor Trudeau. The conservative was leading by 35 points. So, you know, so I don't know about that. I think Canada is a place like a lot of other places. If you have a good candidate, the candidate's going to win.
But he's still pushing for the liberals, and we don't really know why. Well, this may be helpful. Juno News put this together. This is back from April 1st. It says Carney's ex-company Brookfield has deep financial ties to the Trump family. Turns out business does bring in sickening company. That's right. When Mark Carney was in Brookfield, he had the Trumps as clients. According to this article, Canadian investment firm Brookfield, formerly chaired by Liberal leader Mark Carney, has close business ties to the Trump family. Canadian investment firm Brookfield, formerly chaired by Liberal leader Mark Carney, has close ties to the Trump family. In 2018, Brookfield agreed to lease a New York City property from Jared Kushner, that's Trump's son-in-law, U.S. President Donald Trump's son-in-law. The lease was for a 99-year billion-dollar agreement, which saw the company forking over the full $1.1 billion up front instead of paying it off annually. Kushner served as the White House senior advisor to Trump during the time of the Brookfield deal and also dealt with the administration's relationship to the Middle East, visiting Qatar to discuss its blockade against the United States, which was eventually lifted. Brookfield's second largest stakeholder during this time was the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Qatar, which helped to finance the billion-dollar deal. The deal was brokered in 2018 before Carney became chair of Brookfield, and at a time when Kushner's family was in debt to repay $1.2 billion in mortgage payments by February 2019, Carney, who still holds $6.8 million in Brookfield financial interests, spoke with Trump for the first time since he took office over the phone Friday, which Carney called cordial and substantive. Trump also displayed newfound respect and diplomacy towards Canada following the conversation, saying it was extremely productive. Interesting. Very, very, very interesting. Almost seems like the trade war, the tariffs, the anger between Canada and the United States, that's restructuring the relationship, like pro wrestling, like boxing. It's all for game. It's all for show. In the end, both players end up winning anyway. They get a paycheck. Trump also, I already read that. It was a dramatic change in tone considering one day prior, Carney announced that Canada's relationship with the United States was over. The old relationship we had with the United States based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations is over, Carney said Thursday. What exactly the United States does next is unclear, but what is clear is we have, as Canadians, we have agency, we have power. We are masters in our own home. Carney and Trump now appear to be on good footing with plans to meet immediately after the election. Do you notice how, while, you know, when Mark Carney was coordinated in at any of the time there, Justin Trudeau, none of the people went down to Mar-a-Lago to actually talk to Trump directly and to combat this trade war. Justin Trudeau went down there for a meal. He sat down, but it didn't result in anything. Daniel Smith, however, the premier of Alberta, went down to Mar-a-Lago and got an extension to our trade war. It was supposed to happen January 20th, but we got extended to February 1st because of Daniel Smith reminding America and reminding Trump in particular that Canada provides a lot of essential energy to the United States, and it's a beneficial to a lot of the northern area. So that was our saving grace. That was our saving grace. But we haven't seen anything since. We have not seen anybody negotiating with anyone in part with this. And it just seems like an absolute farce. It just seems like a circus. Like I said, it just seems like pro wrestling. It seems like it's all for show, and we're getting screwed with it. We didn't vote for this. We didn't want this to happen. No Canada or the United States did not voted for this, but we get stuck with it. Some speculate that their positive relationship could be tied with Carney's help in stonewalling the U.S. Senate Finance Committee's investigation into the Brookfield-Kushner deal regarding the $1.1 billion check. Information was requested of Brookfield in 2022, while Carney was at the helm by the committee, who was never handed over. Committee Chair Senator Ron Wyden sent a letter that year to Brookfield's Bay Street office in Toronto, requesting detailed information from Brookfield to understand the process by which Brookfield paid Kushner Companies $1.2 billion in 2018 to sign a 99-year lease on the 666 Fifth Avenue property in Manhattan. That doesn't sound sure at all. However, Brookfield, chaired by Carney, twice declined to provide the committee this information, instead stonewalling on whether it initially misled the public on its decision to use the Qatari-backed BPY to invest in a Kushner property, despite statements indicating it would avoid doing so due to conflicts of interest. The committee was seeking answers to specific questions regarding whether Brookfield was aware that members of the Kushner family were holding discussions with Qatari government officials and businessmen. Additionally, the senators wanted to know whether the Qatari Investment Authority or Qatari government were made aware that Brookfield was negotiating with Kushner companies regarding the transaction. True North commented Prime Minister's office and the Liberal Party of Canada request comment on the situation, but did not receive a response. Reiterate the words of George Carlin. It's a big giant club and you ain't in it. That is what you see here. And that makes me almost furious that this trade war exists. That we could have actually avoided all this tension, avoided all this. Mark Carney would not be prime minister if we actually avoided this. We could have actually had a more sane politician, but yet you create the circus, you create the distraction to dangle in front of people's noses, and meanwhile, this whole time, you were actually buddy-buddy. This whole time, you were part of the same club. You're part of the same cloth. Now we're seeing the business side of Mark Carney and Donald Trump. And now you kind of understand that, oh, Donald Trump would be more favorable to a businessman like Mark Carney. Because the two of them could come with some deal to screw off more people. Instead of Pierre Poilievre, who may be more focused on Canada as a country. That Mark Carney, the businessman, the business leeching from the WEF, who sees Canada less of a country and more of an asset. So here is video of this, of Mark Carney, or when Donald Trump called Mark Carney, and this was the start of conversations back and forth. It didn't lead to anything. other than a temporary pause. It didn't really much lead to anything. But here's Donald Trump talking to the press room, to the press gallery, of his conversation with Mark Carney. And you tell me that there's something behind closed doors, that there's more of a love-hate relationship, almost like it's pro wrestling. It's all fabricated, this hatred of each other, this fighting back and forth, when really they're good buds. They're enjoying each other's company.
Canada's Prime Minister says that they will be implementing retaliatory tariffs. You said if that were to happen, that you would be responding with large-scale tariffs. Will you be following through with that promise?
Well, absolutely, but we had a very good conversation. Mark called me today at 10 o'clock. We put out a statement. We had a very, very good talk. He's going through an election now, and we'll see what happens, but we have...
I love how he's stating they called Mark Carney like he's calling his good buddy from college. Like, I called Mark up the other day. We were, hanging out, chilling, relaxing. He had to do some, campaigning because there's like an election thing. I don't know what was going on, but yeah, Mark and I are good. We're going to meet next week and get some taquitos at Taco Bell. It's going to be good. It's going to be great. Great.
Liberation Day, as you know, on April 2nd, and I'm not referring to Canada, but many countries have taken advantage of us, the likes of which nobody even thought was possible for many, many decades, And, that has to stop. We're going to end up with a very good relationship with Canada and a lot of the other countries. Some we probably won't. It won't be so pleasant, but I think most countries are agreeing with me. They actually... many of them have actually apologized. They said, look, we have taken advantage. And I don't blame them as much as I blame the people that stood, in this case I can say the men, because so far they've been all men, haven't they? But the men that sat right there and behind the Resolute desk, mostly the Resolute desk, I don't know if you know, you have a choice of 7 desks. The Resolute is the one I like, but some chose other ones. But they sat right behind a desk right in this location. And they let our country be hurt very badly, but I didn't do that. But we had a very good talk, the Prime Minister and myself, and I think things are going to work out very well between Canada and the United States. Yeah.
Oh, God. I know America is claiming to cut back on its expenses and not fund public services, but can we take some tax dollars and help Trump get into an improv class? Him on the spot does not go well. It does not go well. When he's got, things written down and maybe some jokes at hand, or if he's in a rally with just the regular crowd, yeah, it can be funny, he can be hysterical, but when he's just standing there with the press trying to think of the next word, it's just embarrassing. Like, what? Okay, yeah, you like a certain desk. Cool, great. What does that have to do with your call to Mark Carney? What does that have to do with Canada's relation with the United States? And also, if you're able to patch up the, back and forth, you're able to patch up the semantics, why do we have these tariffs? Just what I'd be saying. And we could easily avoided the tariffs. We could have easily avoided had we just had a conversation. We just gone to the table, renegotiated, talk about our trades, talk about where it went wrong. That's all you have to do. All you have to do. Instead, here we are with endless tariffs back and forth. We have ongoing situation with that. High inflation, cost of living's not going to be fixed. And now we're witnessing that Mark Carney, that people voted for because they were fear-mongered to think that he was going to save Canada, turns out was actually a benefactor for Trump. Or at least Trump's family. So I'm going to call this segment, You've Been Duped, Boy. You've been duped. You have been duped to vote for Mark Carney. That whole elbows up, we're going to fight Trump. Well, it just got revealed that that was all a big Right? Joke. Well, at least they got Mike Myers to cameo in a campaign ad. That's important because Mike Myers, maybe he's desperate for